You're in the military with Summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about another massive missile and drone strike that took place during the previous night. The most important thing is that this night both the Russians and the Ukrainians were attacking each other. And this morning the pro-Ukrainian sources published this photo where we can see the approximate routes of Russian attacks. As you can see, once again the Russians were using hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles. After a short break, the Russians launched a combined missile strike on Kiev and its agglomeration. For the attack, the Russians employed at least 4 types of drones: Geraint-2, Harpy A1, Gerbera, Parodia, as well as ballistic missiles Iskander MKN-23 and cruise missiles Caliber. The targets included energy infrastructure objects in the Kiev region, industrial facilities in Kiev, and residential buildings. So once again, if you take a look at this map, you're going to see that the Russians were attacking almost just the city of Kiev and probably some settlements to the south of the city of the capital of Ukraine. And there are several explosions in the area of the city by the name of Pavlograd, in the area of the Russian Zaporozhye offensive operation and Dnipropetrovsk offensive operation. But when talking about explosions along the line of combat contact, this is a regular thing. The Russians attack this territory every day. But when talking about the city of Kiev, of course, the Russians were trying to destroy something important. You know that these days Zelensky is talking a lot about air defense systems, so if you ask my opinion, I believe that the Russians were trying to destroy another batch of air defense systems that were supplied by the Western countries. Furthermore, I would like to remind you that the United States of America is considering to stop sending Ukraine with supplying Ukraine with air defense systems, because according to Pete Hegseth, if they send, let's say, another system to Marco Rubio, if they send another air defense system to Ukraine, the Russians will destroy it in a week. Air defense systems supplied to Kiev are destroyed within a week, and this has been happening for 2 or 3 years. The US is negotiating with Kiev about supplying weapons that will help protect the country's power grid, according to the US Secretary of State. But ultimately, if this equipment is destroyed within a week of installation, it will remain a problem. This has been the case for the past 2 to 3 years. So we believe that Zelensky received additional batch of air defense systems, and most likely during the previous night the Russians destroyed it. For example, during the previous night we received this video. At least the author of this video says that this is exactly what was happening this morning. As you can see, according to the date and according to the time, this situation took place almost at 1 a.m. And here we can see the work of the MIM-104 Patriot SAM system, and this system was caught on camera attempting to intercept ballistic missiles of the Iskander M complex. So in this video we can see how Ukrainians, using probably a new batch of air defense system, a new batch of Patriot systems, were trying to bring down Russian missiles and drone above the city of Kiev. So this is very difficult to understand whether the Ukrainians were successful or not. This morning we still haven't received many updates and videos about the consequences, so we believe that during the upcoming day we're gonna get additional information about the situation, and we're gonna get additional videos probably from the, let's say, power plants, or maybe from the let's say Patriot systems area where they were installed, and so on. Now let's discuss the situation along the line of combat contact, and first let's talk about one of the most important questions for Ukraine and for the Western partners. Zelensky stated this, specifying that Ukraine is currently recruiting 30,000 troops per month, but the partners and the military are raising the issue of greater mobilization. However, the authorities intend to maintain a balance in this matter, ensuring that sufficient people work and pay taxes that finance the army. That's why I respond during military meetings, and of course soldiers and partners raise this issue, but partners aren't on the battlefield, and therefore, with all due respect to our partners, we have to decide to mobilize up to 30,000 troops monthly. So this is a very important statement. For example, if we try to calculate the number of Ukrainian soldiers that were mobilized since the beginning of the special military operation, almost 4 years passed since the beginning, so it would be more than 1,500,000 soldiers. Don't forget that Ukraine had at the beginning several hundred thousand soldiers, so which means that if Ukraine Ukraine didn't have losses since the beginning of the special military operation, then a Ukraine army by the end of the 2025 should approach the number of 2 millions. But obviously Ukraine doesn't have this number of soldiers. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next, but it looks like Zelensky is trying to blackmail the Western countries, trying to tell them, if you want me to mobilize more forces, more troops, you need to pay me more money, you need to give me more weapons. If you don't do this, I will not mobilize, and the front line will continue collapsing. Now let's discuss the situation along the line of combat contact, and first let's talk about the eastern Zaporozhye direction, where the group of forces east continue their offensive operation. This is the map by the end of the 13th of November of 2025, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 14th of November of 2025. As you can see, the Russians during the previous 12 hours managed to improve their positions in the direction of the settlements by the name of Nechaevka and Radisnaya. These two villages are located along the R85 road, and this is a part of the Russian plan to move further in the southern direction with the purpose to attack the settlement of Gulyai-Polye, basically from behind, from the northern part. Furthermore, we still haven't received anything regarding the situation in the villages of Ravnopolye, Yablukova. So we are still waiting when the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm Russian control over these two territories. So we believe that maybe today or tomorrow the Russians will do this, because according to pro-Ukrainian sources, these villages were captured by Russians yesterday. So now we are waiting just for the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation confirmation. At the same time, the Russians continued their offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Velika Mikhailovka. During the previous 12 hours, we received several videos of how Russians began bombing and attacking positions, possible temporary deployment points of the armed force of Ukraine in the central part of the settlement, trying to force Ukrainians to fall back from this area. Now the Russians are trying to create a foothold on the Ukrainian side of the river of Volcha with the purpose to send troops and to dig in deeper. And as soon as the Russians are able to do this, of course, they will continue advancing further until the village of Velika Mikhailovka falls completely in Russia's hands. Now let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk agglomeration. Know that now there is one important and very important difference between the situation in the city of Pokrovsk months ago and the current situation. And the main difference is that the Russians at some points of the city limits of border of the city of Pokrovsk, the city of Pokrovsk is already behind the Russians. So for example, this situation concerns, for example, the Russian offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Grushne. The city of Pokrovsk is far behind Russians, already far behind, and now the Russians are fighting for the outskirts of Grushne, and this is a very huge and media loss of the Ukrainian authorities and military authorities. For example, during the previous 24 hours, these are the changes that you might find on the map. So this is the end of the 13th of November, and this is the situation of the beginning of the 14th of November. So the city of Pokrovsk, according to different mappers, is already behind edge Russian positions for 3 kilometers. So Russians managed not just to secure the city of Pokrovsk, its city limits, its border, but the Russians managed to improve their positions on 3 kilometers around the city, at least in the northwestern direction. So this is a very important. Furthermore, when talking about updates that were provided by different pro-Russian sources, during the previous 48 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions for 3.200 kilometers, and the Russians managed to move even further for another 2 kilometers and to enter the southern part of the settlement of Grishna. So the Russians are trying to secure this small forest, Seredyansky Ravine forest, this one, to dig in deeper and to probably control the situation in this area. So we see that the battle for the Grishna has begun. The Russians yet haven't finished the battles for Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, but they have already started another battle, which is a very important one. During the previous 24 hours, we continue receiving different photos and videos of the city of Pokrovsk, of how the city looked like before the beginning of the special military operation and how the city looks like these days. So lots of photos, lots of videos, a very interesting comparison of the city of Pokrovsk between 2019 and 2025. Yes, the city wasn't reduced to ruins as the city, the northern part of the city of Volchansk or Bakhmut, but anyway, I have some doubts right now whether the civilians will return come back to the city with the purpose to restore it. I'm not sure about this. Anyway, the Russians continue their offensive, and today, according to different neutral mappers, the armed forces of the Russian Federation during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their positions on the northeastern part. So this is the map by the end of the 13th, and this is the beginning of the 14th. The Russians secured another block, and the Russians continue tightening the news around the Ukrainian forces in the city of Mirnograd. As for the city of Mirnograd, the most important updates this morning are coming from its southern part, which is about to be taken by Russians completely. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of videos, and this is probably the most important one. In this video, we can see how a Russian soldier raised the Russian flag on the mine of the mine by the name of Dimitrova. So here we can see a Russian soldier who was waving with the flag in this area. So this is the let's say real confirmation that Russians, as a result of clashes, managed to establish complete control over this strategical position. So we can say that the southern Mirnograd has fallen, and Ukrainians lost control over this. Furthermore, the Russians, according to different mappers, are advancing on the territory of the southern citadel of the city of Mirnograd. We're talking about this high-rise building area. So this territory is also about to be taken by Russians. This is a very important position, because if Russians somehow are able to establish complete control over the territory, this will lead to the situation when the Ukrainians, who are currently located to, let's say, bottom of this red line, would be caught in cauldron without any chances for evacuation, because even if they are able to break through this cauldron, they will answer another cauldron, and then another cauldron, and another cauldron, and so on and so on. Now let's talk about the situation in the area of the settlement of Shakhova. Today, several sources reported that the village of Shakhova was captured by Russians. Several sources just reported that the village is about to be taken by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So we are witnessing the end of the most important battle for the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration, the Battle of Shakhova. This is a small village to the northeast of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, and Ukrainians tried to recapture these territories, because not just recapture, but to develop their positions in this area, because this is exactly the place where Ukrainians were planning to create a corridor for evacuation for the contingent of the armed forces of Ukraine from the territory of the city of Mirnograd. But now we start receiving reports that this operation is about to be finished. Ukrainians will not continue this offensive operation. Ukrainians lost control over the settlement of Vladimirovka, and according to several pro-Russian sources, are about to lose complete control over the settlement of Shakhova. The Russians, by taking under control these territories, will maintain the logistics significantly. They will maintain the lines, and then Russians will be able to continue offensive operation, and this time deep inside of the Donetsk region, with the purpose to establish complete control over these territories, and to probably finish at least some paragraphs of Putin's demands of the peaceful settlement of the conflict. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes on my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.